All across MTG, a reverberation rising throughout the land to meet the occasion. A motley crew known as the Rebel Nation, queens and pirates establishing a new foundation. Fit to stay loud, too loud to stay and sit. We're rebellion proud, far too legit to quit.
It only harmonizes if it wins prizes. Comment below as we walk through the 7th week of Dragonstorm Standard. Welcome to the final episode of State of the Meta before we take our summer break. That's right, after this episode, Max and I are taking a couple months off to rest, relax, and revamp this show for the fall. Expect our return in August, around the time Edge of Eternities drops and Standard rotates.
Yes, and without further ado, we looked at 11 major tournaments this past weekend, including a regional championship in Montreal, leading to 88 top 8 spots. Izzet Cutter, of course, continued its reign of terror at the top with 25 top 8s and 3 trophies. Love it or hate it, Cutter is a puzzle piece that isn't readily hated out despite a concerted effort by the next 2 archetypes.
Mono Red Aggro came in second this week with 13 top 8s and 2 trophies of its own. Now, fam, I've been running this on the ladder for fun and bumped from 92% in Mythic up to number 898 in a single evening, just tearing apart Cutter decks. So if you want to see my build and sideboard guide, it's sitting in coffee grinders for you.
It feels oddly appropriate that Orzhov Pixies is in third place this week with 12 top 8s and 2 trophies. This archetype in most metagames wouldn't be viable, but with Cutter taking up somewhere between 25 and 33% of the metagame, it continues to put up numbers. Welcome to the reason everyone is resentfully putting Weltleaf Liege and Baloth back in their sideboards.
Dimir Tempo rounds out our Tier 1 selection with 9 top 8s and a single trophy. In an era where everyone is focused on Cutter, Dimir came back with a vengeance, deciding it could coin flip Cutter while reminding everyone else just how strong Kaido into Curiosity still is.
Azorius Control kicks off our Tier 2 with 8 top 8s and a single trophy. Control has been notably absent for a majority of the season, much like Candolph. It never arrives late, but rather precisely when it intends to. Right after the meta gets defined. Don't sleep on this one, folks. It's tuned for Cutter, ready to battle it out against Combo as well.
Omni Combo takes 6th place with 4 top 8s and a single trophy. Now, I debated placing this higher on the list since it took down RC Montreal this past weekend, but ultimately the list needed some work and it'll likely take off now that the next phase in evolution was introduced in Montreal. We'll cover why in a bit.
And Zur Domain came in 7th with 4 top 8s and a single trophy of its own. Oh wow, where has it been?
Rounding out Tier 2 is Mono Black Demons with 4 top 8s, though 0 trophies. This archetype continues to be a source of confusion in the meta, as half the pilots I've talked to swear it's cracked, yet it continues to struggle putting up results. Time will tell, but unless something changes dramatically in the next week, I think we've hit the ceiling for this archetype pre-Final Fantasy.
Now, over in Brewer's Corner, I'll be taking a look at Rakdos Aggro and my own Azorius Knights.
And I'll be highlighting Boros Midrange and Mono Black Sui. But first, let's talk about the Kutta from another mother, Izzet Kutta. Alrighty, folks. So, Izzet Cutter, Jesus Christ, what an archetype. It just keeps putting up results after results after results. And what we have here is CFT Sock's 2nd place list from RC Montreal. Now, this list did something very clever that many of them have failed to do. First, it recognized that you don't have to just play 4 Flood Maws. You can get that 5th Flood Maw off the board with this town 8 big enough. Spicy. You also get the 6th one in the form of a bounce off if you want it, so that you can play a little defense on the Drake Hatcher or Thundertrap Trainer front. Also quite spicy. Furthermore, it pushed into this Thundertrap Trainer engine, saying that, okay, we need to be able to just grind. That's going to be what we're going to have to do through a lot of these decks. So we're going to add in a couple extra pieces of grind with the trainers going with stock ups. This is really just quite an archetype. I mean, there's no consistent way to beat it. You need multiple pieces of hate to keep it in check. Even if you have lockdowns, for instance, you're probably going to need an Authority of Consoles tucked under ones. When they Flood Maw that back, you still stutter step their next turn.
Yeah, wow. I don't know what to say, man. This archetype's been dominant. It's probably going to remain dominant for just a little while longer at the very least. We'll see. But new set's coming. So what does this archetype gain, if anything, from Final Fantasy?
I mean, first and foremost, I look at all the different options in the commons and uncommon slots that are just cheap and able to readily work with what the Cutter engine's trying to do, because it's not really trying to go past 3 mana on the curve, so that eliminates most of the Final Fantasy set alone, right? But Sleep Magic, it's an option. I think it's probably worse than Unable to Scream or Into the Flood Maw, but let's not discount it. It's still an option. Stolen Uniform is particularly intriguing if we're trying to do something weird in the Cutter mirror. Again, this seems like it's probably too weak, but it could be a thing technically. Freya Crescent is like Flying Men plus Cutter ramp that allows you to go turn 2 Cutter plus value. That's a little terrifying, I'm not going to lie. I don't know, again, if this is just too narrow and niche and weak, but it's quite a card. It's quite a card. The ability to go turn 1 Crescent into turn 2 Cutter sleight of hand start swinging is a turn faster than everyone else. Now, Suplex, I could see this in the Cutter mirror. You have Exile for the Cutter, you have Exile for the Hatcher. It's a decent card, but the card that I think everyone's really trying to figure out if it's good or not is Vivi Orniteer. This is a Cutter grind card that gets out of hand quickly with Stock Up and Friends. The number of times you're going to take this 0-3, play it, and if it doesn't die on impact, it all of a sudden becomes this massive engine with Stock Up, Sleight of Hand, and Opt to just keep on producing mana, keep on allowing you to dig. Like, it is scary what this card's going to do, and that's why we're already seeing it at pre-sale. What is it, Max? Like $75 everywhere I looked at this point?
Yeah, and rising. This card, I predicted in the Rebellion Discord that this would be possible ban in the future if things get out of hand with Cutter. That, or it's just not going to get any play at all if Cutter becomes irrelevant somehow, but I don't see that happening. And in particular, it takes one of the weaknesses of Cutter and shores it up, which is once they run out of cards, once they run out of resources, they don't draw the stock up, they're kind of like dead in the water in the mid-game, late-game scenario. If it gets that far and gets that long, this kind of defies that a little bit. So yeah, I'm a little scared of the card, honestly, with the way Cutter is positioned.
That's fair. And with that, let's take it on over to Mono Red Aggro. Alrighty, Charmander is back at it again, taking down an 82-player MTGO challenge last week with Mono Red Aggro, fresh off their win at RC Hartford with some minor tweaks to the main, and let's take a look at what those are. So, the 4th Magebane Lizard, it's in the main, and that's just where we're at with Cutter these days. You need those 4 slots, those are all flex slots, those Magebane Lizards, and you're just saying, that's how dominant Cutter is. We need to be pre-boarded against it. You note the Scorching Shot got moved out of the main, it's over in the sideboard. So if you look at this list now, everyone, you're going to note that there are 10 flex slots. The Magebane Lizards are flex slots, the Witchstalker Frenzies are flex slots, and the 2 Swift Spears are weirdly flex slots. The question everybody's trying to ask right now is what mixture of cards do you need in those 10 slots? Because you're not replacing the mouse package. You need the early interaction, the early removal. Screaming Nemesis is part of why you're in this. The mana base is consistent. Monstrous Rage is broken, right? So you're just down to 10 flex slots and trying to figure out what they're supposed to be. I like this arrangement in the Cutter meta. I think Magebane Lizard is worth having in the main. I don't mind Swift Spear as your 9th and 10th creature on curve for turn 1 plays. And the Frenzy is about the only spot where I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I don't know if we need that right now. But it's certainly good when everyone in Dimir is playing Preachers and Shellies, so I can't really argue with it too much.
Yeah, agreed. Now, same question here. What, if anything, what new toys does Mono Red get from Final Fantasy?
There's only 2 I've seen so far, Max. I mean, again, let's look at Suplex and say, okay, this is like Sorcery Speed of Braid, which may not be the best thing in the world against Cutter in particular, but it still does deal with Cutter while simultaneously being able to exile Enduring Curiosity. That's not a small thing that you're able to do. But the card, I think, is a 2 of instantly over 2 of these Witchstalker Frenzies is Self-Destruct. And to give you an example of how busted this card's going to feel from time to time, if you swing with a Heartfire Hero and you've Monstrous Raged it up to 5, and then you self-destruct it, you're going to deal 15 points of damage, right? That is turn 3, 15 points of damage minimum. You gave that thing Double Strike with Manifold, that's turn 3 win, right there. So yeah, I think we're going to see it. It also makes the removal very difficult for other people to play, knowing that at any moment they go, I'll remove that, and you go, absolutely not, we're flinging it at you. So it's a little rough when you're able to do that, and it has that same capability not just with Heartfire Hero, but also with Screaming Nemesis, and being able to deal damage to itself, which then redirects over to an opponent or any other target.
Absolutely, and this is one of the arguments for why we may possibly see a Mono Red oriented ban in the future. We'll see. If that turn 3 win happens very often at certain events, certain RCs, Pro Tour, we may see that occur. But I don't know. Don't quote me on that one. But let's move on to the next deck. One that, as we said, is only alive because of the current meta. Orzhov Pixie.
MJ23 took down Soul Strong in the finals of a 45-player MTGO challenge this past week with Orzhov Pixie, smashing the haters and Dimir Tempo alike, so let's dive in. This deck hasn't altered dramatically. I don't expect it to alter dramatically before we get to Final Fantasy. The second Lorne's in the main, the second Beza's in the main, the second Get Lost is in the main. All right, we've decided we are going to hedge even harder for Cutter and red base to aggro, but I think the Get Lost is an acknowledgement that we do still need to handle Kaidos, right? Dimir's still running around. Let's also look that the sideboard is now 4 Rest in Peace and 2 Quetzal's Flanker, and to that I have to say, who hurt you? Like, that's some Omni Combo hate like I've not seen in a while. That's somebody who lost to Omni Combo one too many times, tilted a little and said, no, we're playing 6 pieces of Graveyard Interaction on top of 4 Duress. Like, we are not just losing this matchup, we are coming back at them strong. So I love that this hard hedges the post board for Omni Combo. It has some other pieces it picks up because of that against Oculus, but ultimately this is here because Cutter exists and it's everywhere, and red-based aggro as a rule is everywhere right now, so sometimes you just got to play all the cards that hate it.
Yeah, speaking of, this is ironically 2 copies of Wiltleaf Legion, the sideboard for the mirror, just Orzhov Pixie recognizing itself right there. But same question as the last, what does this deck gain for Final Fantasy?
So I think it kind of diverges into 2 potential plot points, right? You can either go lower on the curve and play something like Dark Confidant to go with like Caustic Bronco and say, all right, we're abandoning the lockdown plan. We're on the Pixie plan, like just Pixie value, very low curve. We'll have to curve it at 3 in this scenario, but you could do that. And that's something that hasn't been attempted because Confidant hasn't been back yet. Cloud Midgar Mercenary is kind of interesting if you want to go for an equipment top-end plan. There's a couple different pieces of equipment in Final Fantasy that looked spicy, but ultimately I don't know that any of that's strong enough. Nonetheless, it's worth noting because you can blink Cloud. Ultima, this is if you want to go even more control-based, because this blows up artifacts and creatures. It is a nice way to get through all of what Cutter is doing. The problem is, it's 5 mana, it's sorcery speed, this is a format with Spell Pierce. Do you really think you're getting it through? I struggle to believe we're actually going to be able to push Ultimate through, but maybe the Duress does it. Second to last here, Cecil Dark Knight. I don't know that a Death Shadow game plan is viable, but this deck could do that, especially with all the red-based aggro, where you just say, okay, we just need to land this, flip it, and keep rolling. Like, that's where we're going. They're going to get the early hits in. We're not trying to prevent that. But again, that would be abandoning the lockdown plan in all likelihood and pushing more towards that aggressive early game. And last but not least, Squall Seed Mercenary. I don't know if this is better than Sarah Paragon, but it's certainly a different take on Sarah Paragon, and I'm curious to see if it pans out, so I think this is an experiment that's probably worth running, at least for the first week, to figure out if you like it.
Interesting cards, and I like the question about Ultima. It might be a little high curve for the deck, right? But that's definitely a card that's been identified multiple times by other creators and most people in the MTG community as one that can help shut down Cutter in a specific scenario. So I'm 50-50 on whether it'll see play or not. Likely not in this deck, though. Nonetheless, let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about Dimir Tempo.
Bernard Axa won a 191 player standard RC qualifier on MTGO on Memorial Day with Dimir Tempo, evolving the archetype once more with the latest tech, and let's take a look at it. You'll note there's only 1 Flood Pit Drowner in this list, there's not 4. They have diversified that threat base to include 2 Azure Beastbinder, which is a really fun way to turn Cutter off as long as this thing keeps swinging. I don't hate that. I really don't. That's a spicy way to try to interact with Cutter early and stutter step him for just a turn or 2 while you get your engine rolling, right? It's also really hard to block, and you have Kaido and Curiosity. But let's also note that Kaido is down to a 1 of in the main. We're not playing 3-3 split with Curiosity in this. We're saying, nope, we need Shellys, we need Vren. We need the ability to interact on a different axis, and Kaido is too much of a liability into Cutter right now. I like that this deck acknowledges it. I think that's correct. Let's also acknowledge that they're on 3 Duress, 2 Spell Pierce, so they are playing for heavy interaction early to disrupt what your opponent's doing and their ability to interact with you. The 4 Bats also bring that to mind. Like, you are trying to get to the point where when you land a 3 or 4 drop, there's no Floodmaw in hand. There's no way for them to kill it. There's just, here is a 3 to 4 drop that stabilizes the board. Good luck. And that's what this build is doing that the other ones, I think, failed to do in the past. So it's very clever. I'd highly recommend testing this out against Cutters.
That's very fair. I never thought about cutting a couple of Kaidos to make room for Vren and some other cards that acknowledge Cutter. That's interesting and spicy. I like that. Now, it's been said that black is... some people say white, but black is one of the stronger colors coming out of Final Fantasy. So I expect quite a few pieces. What pieces are coming for black and blue Final Fantasy for Dimir?
Well, I think, again, you get to ask the question of, do you want to try for Dark Confidant? I know I'm a paper boomer. I'm very much addicted to playing this card. It was always just a banger of a card when it was in the set. It might be power crept at this point, and it's a little slow. Time will tell. But I do know that if you maintain a low curve and Dark Confidant sticks, the advantage piles up in a hurry. Let's also, again, note that Cecil Dark Knight, not looking bad here. The ability to, again, have that Death Touch 2-3 early on. You don't mind taking the chip damage. Once it flips into a life linker, it starts running away with the game again. And you have the ability to affect that at a very high level because you can reserve removal till after it flips and then start wiping out everything in its path so it can keep pushing through. It's a dangerous game, but Death Shadow always was, right? And this is very much a Death Shadow type of card. Now, final pieces that I think are worth talking about. Tonberry could be a thing. I don't know. 2-1 with First Strike and Death Touch, but it gets a stun counter and it's a 1-drop is very high risk, high reward vibes. But here's the piece I want you to remember. First Strike and Death Touch on a 2-1 means that no one's ever blocking that card, which means Curiosity gets it every time. You know what I mean? Like, that is an abyss against your creatures if they have to keep Curiosity from hitting, and it's also really dangerous when you're playing Kaido to be able to go, yeah, this is getting through. Are you willing to risk the Kaido right now? So I like where that's positioned potentially. And then you have Emmet Selk Unsundered. I don't know if we can actually fill up the graveyard reliably, but it's a Lear remix, and if we can, this card could be really good.
Yeah, quite a few cards, it turns out. Especially, Tonberry for the flavor. Love that card. But First Strike Death Touch is just such a deadly combo, and you rarely see that nowadays on creatures. But interesting to see it on the Tonberry. Lore-wise, it makes sense. But that does it for Tier 2. Or Tier 1. Let's go down into Tier 2, where I will kick things off with Azorius Control. Azorius Control, this up and coming, up and rising archetype. Finally, we're seeing healthy control in the meta, and I actually dig it. More of an aggro player myself, but I actually dig it. We've got 2 copies of Elspeth Smite. This card's seeing a return. Look, it wasn't really sufficient removal back when every red-based deck was playing aggro, playing prowess, but not many people are running Slick Shot, even in the Izzet Cutter. We've seen a lot of versions of that deck cut that card. Being able to remove that turn 1 play, the turn 2 mouse play, Manifold Mouse, very important. Even removing the turn 1 Otter off of Talent, very important because the chip damage on that can really add up over the course of the game. Change the equation. Also a card seeing relevance right now, especially versus low curve, but also against red-based aggro, which is just a relevant thing still right now. And 2 copies of Elspeth Storm, 3 copies of Meringue River Regent, and 1 White Overlord are going to make up your win cons in this control list. A very creature-based win con. Really appreciate that. Elspeth being the army in a can. We're also seeing 3 copies of High Noon in the sideboard, just an acknowledgement of what Cutter can do. And Jace is back as well. Interesting because we are still seeing, the Mirror. We are still seeing Domain. Very big reason to have those cards in your sideboard.
Absolutely. So, Max, the question today will always be any cards from the new set that are going to slot in here.
I am going to talk about a few here. Ultima, we've already kind of mentioned this, but it pretty much stops the Cutter decks dead in their tracks, and I think it fits here more than it does in any other shell, of course. This deck can afford to play 5-drop sorcery speed, and really just put that deck in its tracks, and then it does end the turn, so unfortunately you don't get to stabilize then and there, but the next following turn, you're pretty much set up, especially if they've used up their resources up to that turn, to go ahead and stabilize. I also want to talk about Memories Returning. This card kind of reminds me of Memory Deluge, right? Slightly weaker, but it does have Flashback, and in a control shell, you might get to that flashback turn. You're more than likely going to. So it's definitely going to help you find your pieces. I also want to note the reprint of Syncopate. Maybe as a one-of, exiling certain spells is kind of a bonus. There's still quite a bit of recursion, quite a bit of graveyard play, especially against decks like Oculus, Omni Combo, in Standard right now. So Syncopate, a little bit relevant. And I also want to bring up the Water Crystal. This card can help really push your mill strategy if you want to go that route with Azorius Control. I know mill is starting to come back a little bit. There's some other cards that have been helping with that, especially out of Ixalan. But a sideboard slot to go along with those Jaces in the sideboard, I think it makes pretty good sense, at least as a 1-of, 2-of kind of scenario.
That's fair. That's fair. There's a lot of tools to mess around with. I love what Final Fantasy is adding in for this archetype. But speaking of archetypes that gain a little something, let's talk about Omni Combo.
So Omni Combo, we're seeing it evolve, we're seeing it change. Right now, I want to point out the 3 copies of Oracle of Tragedy. You may not recognize this card. Both modes are useful here in this deck. You can either discard the Omni, get back something that you've had to mill. The Morong River Regent, for example, being able to get that back and play that in the late game. 2 copies of Scroll Shift main board, 1 copy sideboard. Hit your Regent, bounce 2 more permanents. That's always great. It's pretty devastating against, especially the go big decks, being able to bounce their permanents, make them pay for that full mana cost again. You've also got your Overlords. You can bounce those as well, create more tokens. Always a good time with Scroll Shift in a go big deck. Full creature mode in the sideboard. We've got the 4 copies of Overlord, we've got the Boombringer Valkyrie, we've got the 2 Voices of Victory, 2 copies of Beza here as well. It's pretty safe to say Omni wants to pivot into a creature-based aggression strategy, a mid-game, kind of a mid-range aggression strategy. Post-board, so be very aware of that when facing this deck.
I mean, I love the spice of playing Scroll Shift in this because you can Scroll Shift the Omni if you need to protect it, but you can also just Scroll Shift the Overlord to get rolling faster. And that's such a clever way to build this deck, and I love the Oracle of Tragedies. I'm right there with you. That card is so necessary given the number of times I've milled half my River Regions and been like, ah, shit, we can't combo anymore. So, like, it's just better with Oracle. But looking into the future, looking at Final Fantasy, what could you see earning a spot in Omni?
There's actually a few cards that I'm interested in looking at. First, I'll point to the boring stuff. Memories Returning. I already brought that up in Azorius Control. Any kind of high-end Azorius colored deck may want this. It kind of reminds me of Memory Deluge. Kustis Trep. You can basically, in the late game, say you milled your Abuela's Awakening, you can cast it or another needed spell when she enters from the graveyard in the late game scenario, which you'll find yourself in that with this deck. Magic Damper. Sort of a 1 mana cost protection spell that helps you untap as well, in addition to giving you hexproof. So you can bait the Ride's End if you want from a domain opponent, and this is going to protect you from that. I kind of like the 1 mana protection in blue. I think blue kind of needs it. But the really exciting kind of the Timmy in me gets excited about the 2 cards in particular summons Knights of the Round and Bahamut, and that is because Abuela's Awakening can cast these, can sort of clone these. So I'm excited, especially about Knights of the Round, because I know it's got like several turns of coming in and just putting bodies on the board, which is what this deck really wants to do, especially post board, and then giving you the tool in the last stage to just wipe your opponent. So yeah, I'm excited about those 2 summons in particular, and those are already 2 summons I'm targeting with my Reanimator list, thinking about ways to sort of cheat those in. This is a deck that can do it as well, and I didn't realize it until today when I read the cards. So very excited about those.
Fair. And I mean, Summon Knights of the Round is going to be so spicy with Abuela's Awakening's ability to just pull that out of your graveyard or just hard cast it after you get Omni. Like, I feel like that might have been the card we actually wanted while we were busy playing Overlords. And let's not forget that Scroll Shift blinks it back to 1. So that's some spice right there, Max. I'm with you. But talking about another deck that just wants to go over the top, let's talk about Zur's Domain.
Good old Zur's Domain, tried and true by this point. This deck has run the longest, I would say, in standard currently. I mean, this is a standard veteran rep by this point. We do have some small evolutions, some small shifts, 2 copies of High Noon in the main board. You just have to stop Cutter at this point, and that card does a decent job of doing that in a lot of scenarios. 3 copies of Split Up, 2 copies of Day of Judgment. You got to have those early board wipes. I know 4 isn't exactly an early turn, but you definitely need to have that and be able to board wipe if you're facing against Cutter or any of the low curve aggro. 2 copies of Rakshas's Bargain in the sideboard. I've always called this a stock up that triggers beans, and it also provides some pretty decent fodder for Analyze the Pollen as well. So you're going to be adding to that tool to be able to go find what you need, your white overlords and whatnot. This deck, and it's pretty much at the end of the road here. I mean, we're kind of seeing it settled, solved, if you want to call it that. These slots are pretty fixed. It's just the sideboard slots that sort of orient themselves around the changing meta, and right now it's all Cutter.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and you're right. Zur, at this point, this is a veteran deck, right? This deck has PTSD. It's played so many games. So at this point, if this is Zur's last ride before rotation, do we have any new enchantments worth playing out of Final Fantasy?
I have one, And we just talked about it, Knights of the Round. This deck can't cheat it out necessarily, but it can get to the point where it can just hard cast it. And I love Knights of the Round. I think lore-wise it matches perfectly with what it does in the video game. But continually filling your board and then giving you the ability to just crush your opponents, kind of like an Elspeth Stormslayer style. Just go wide and then crush your opponents. Not that great against control, right? You kind of have to play around the counter spells. But if you get to this point, you've stabilized. It's a super spicy way to end the game.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a chase card going into this, honestly. The number of ways in which it could affect the format, and those big, heavy top ends, if they hit just right and the power level's just high enough, you'll see everybody try to cheat them into play. So I'm with you there. But let's pivot over here. Let's get to the end of Tier 2 and talk a little bit about demons.
Good old demons. And my theory is it's gone one color recently because of just the low curve aggro, easy mana base. You need that to be able to succeed. Some kind of advantage, and that is shown here in Mono Black Demons. I'm seeing 4 full-on copies of Duress. To me, this feels a touch much, but if you think about it, Omni, Domain, Control, Cutter, all of these are running non-creature spells that you definitely want to hit with efficiency and hit early in the game. So full set, I'm honestly not surprised. Legions to Ashes also in the deck. Honestly, right now, with the way things are, it feels like the best 3-mana removal for the Cutter meta. It just does. And Cruel Claw's Heist on turn 2 feels underpowered if you're looking at any other kind of meta, especially one that's low curve aggro. But in this meta, it's guaranteed to hit something vital that your opponent's ready to have. We're in the age of aggressive mulliganing, and especially in those scenarios where you mulligan once or twice to get the cards you need to get the Corey Steel Cutter, that can be pretty devastating. And then last, I want to point out the Revenants. We've gone up to 2 copies. Feels pretty good to renew these on one of your Preachers or one of your 2 Shelleys. I just want to say, so plenty of targets for the renew on that.
Oh yeah, hell, you've even got Archfiend of the Dross and those demons coming out of the Ritual Chamber, so I'm with you. But again, looking at this list, looking at Final Fantasy, what toys do we get?
There's really only one I want to play, but I'll mention it last because there's some other candidates that I've heard and I've seen talk in the MTG community about. First, Arden the Usurper. This seems like it's it's made for demons, right? But at 8 mana, it's just not relevant. And I think that's going to be the judgment call on a lot of these Final Fantasy cards. A lot of them are just a little bit high mana value to be relevant. However, this next one, Cecil Dark Knight, Redeemed Paladin, actually feels at home in this deck, prone to hurting itself with Annex in the early turns. But, I don't know. I still think that's a pretty risky play for this deck, especially at the speed at which decks like Cutter can really nail you down. So I'm unsure. Darkness Crystal is another piece I've seen talk about. This seems a little exciting if you're a mono black player, especially. I can kind of see a place for this card here. Unsure what you slot out though. It seems like everything in the deck is kind of necessary for it to work, to cohere. It'll take some time to experiment with this card. I'll have to play it myself to really evaluate it properly, and it does kind of feel like a win more in my opinion. But I don't know. You tell me in the comments. But the piece I am excited about is Demon Wall. Especially when you consider Revenant is in the format, this actually becomes more relevant. I'll need to experiment a little bit with it, like I just said with Darkness Crystal, but I feel pretty strongly about having a 2-mana demon in the set. We already have that with the Rakshasa, so I'm pretty excited to test this out in Mono Black Demons or, Rakdos or Golgari flavors as well.
The rise of demons is coming, is what you're saying. I'm here for it. But with that, we're going to move over. We're going to talk about Brewer's Corner, favorite segment every week. Max, let's kick things off. Tell us a little bit about Rakdos Aggro.
All right, classic Rakdos, trying to come back, trying to be relevant. I mean, these are 2 very strong colors in Standard, so why not? Our draw engines, we've got 2 copies of Annex in the main, 2 copies of Annex in the sideboard, and that's just an indication this deck isn't focused on being a Demons deck per se. It really just wants to have those draw engines so it can have sustained aggression against the opponent, and that's what you need in this meta, is to have sustained aggression to really survive. 2 Torch the Tower, 4 Duress. We already talked about why Duress is important and significant right now. It hits a lot of decks. 2 Torch, 2 Cut Down, 2 Dreams Steel and Oil. I feel like you need to have that early disruption, and these cards all help you with the Cutter decks, especially a Braid, a 1-of in the main. I think it's just necessary at this point, just to a just in case scenario. Full set of Fear, Missing Out. Don't undercount this card. It's not just for Delirium decks. This card can be very aggressive, especially with the 2 copies of Tersa Lightsaber. We got 2 copies of Revenant here as well, and plenty of targets creature-wise to be able to hit. Only 2 Archfiends, 2 Shellies, so those are going to be your prime targets. Gix's Command main, just an indicator of the low curve aggro, and Harvester of Misery main is also just an indicator that we want to be able to beat low curve aggro and hit them early and consistently.
I'm with you, and it's a Demons list that's embracing a Rakdos flavor like we just talked about. Demons has got a lot of ways it could evolve. It could go this route, it can go over to white, it can go to mono black. We're not really sure where, but the fact is this is a list that looks like a strong starting spot for the Rakdos build when you're trying to mess around with a new Final Fantasy set, so I'm here for it. But with that, let's get over to the next one and talk about Boros Midrange. Shout out to Dusk Bay Wolf for pulling this together. Top 8 at a major event. Well played. It's just haterade on wheels, and I'm here for it. Honestly, this is what I love. You know what I mean? This is somebody who looked at the format and said, okay, what if we just played the best cards against Cutter, some life gain, the hardest threats to answer, some ways to blow up artifacts, the heavy hitters against red-based aggro, the heavy hitters against control. It does such an efficient job of pushing that narrative, and then you get to grind things out with a card that nobody's really seen yet in Standard, which is Brews Tarl, Roving Rancher. I had to read this card like a lot. It's just not a card we've seen, you know what I mean? But the ability to give those Ox and Double Strike is a hell of a thing, and you get to push a lot of pressure very quickly. Let's not forget that in conjunction with Elspeth doubles your Oxen, which doubles the amount of Double Strikers you have. So it's got a little mini combo, some synergy just sitting in there. Overall, though, this is just the most efficient haterade engine I've seen in a minute. So if you're looking at the established meta and saying, nah, it's time to hate on it a little, this is exactly where I'm going.
I totally dig it. I tried that out a couple of times on ladder. Ran immediately into 2 Cutter decks. Won. It was fantastic. It felt good.
Nice. And with that, let's look at the future, right? Let's look at some 2 decks now, starting with Azorius Knights, that look at what decks could look like with the new set in them. Max, take it away. Azorius Knights.
All right. This is a tribal that, I've been playing since the Pioneer. I really love Knights in particular because in the format still is our Marshals of Zhalfir, right? We have our commander. We have our Invasion of New Phyrexia, 3 copies of. Don't sleep on that card. We've also got Werefox Bodyguard. Werefox Bodyguard, definitely some, remember the Brutal Cathar days. This card can really help you in sort of a mid-range creature-based matchup. Virtue of Loyalty, don't forget that it produces a Knight on turn 2. Knight of Aaron Eos, we're going in on 2 of these. It's not like Boros Convoke, right? We're not going to have a ton of go-wide bodies, but we have enough that we can sort of keep the party going with Knight Errant, at least a couple of copies. Elspeth is a hell of a top end at 5. Just a very strong card overall. I thought it could really show its strength in this deck. But the new cards, Dion, Bahamut's Dominant. This card flips over into Bahamut, Warden of Light. It has the ability to really just, the first 2 phases put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. They gain flying. That's going to be the common theme here, is being able to gain flying. But anyway, with Battle Menu being a card, and I'll talk about that in a minute because it is in my top 5, I think this deck has enough counter spells, removal, a combination of things to be able to support it and have the supporting cards to be able to hold up the tribal. I'll be honest, I don't know if this deck is going to be fast enough to compete in today's Standard, but post-rotation, really when the Final Fantasy set will shine, I think, is post-rotation. This could come back and be a thing. I don't know. This might be a good starting point just for week 1 for my play.
Hell yeah. And with that, I'm going to show you mine. Suicide Black. It's been a long time since we had a Sui deck running around, but we finally got it. Between Gix, Dark Confident, Caustic Bronco, and Cecil, we've got 4 different cards that are all going to hit you and ping you for life, but are going to provide advantage and momentum. And this is what I meant by, if we're going to find a shell for Cecil, if we're going to find a shell for Dark Confident, let's go low to the ground. Let's really embrace the fact that we need these draw engines, and we have them on the back of Gix, Bronco, and Confidant. We have all the disruption we're looking for with Duress, Deep Cavern Bat. We've got decent removal between Go for the Throat, Annoyance, and Cut Downs. That's the 10 pieces of removal. You've got scaling threats. Tiny Bones works really well in conjunction with Cut Down, Go for the Throat right now. Evolve Sleeper just runs away with games if it goes unchecked, so that gives you enough early drops. And that's really, I think, what this deck suffered from not having, was not having a card like Cecil. Just an early drop that puts in work. And this build does. Let's also note that we have Drannith Ruins in this, which I love, because I don't know if you've ever gotten to play Bat on turn 5 and make it a 3/3 with lifelink. It feels pretty damn good. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, don't sleep on Drannith Ruins. That card has some serious applications that people don't think about, like Preacher of the Schism. But with Bat, oh my gosh, yeah, that can be bad.
And that's going to bring us to our final segment, Ahead of the Curve. Now, Max, we looked at 12 archetypes in our recap, and since this is our last episode before Edge of Eternities, we're going to focus on what cards you should probably grab from Final Fantasy when it drops, instead of talking about what to expect in that last week of Dragonstorm Standard before the new set drops. So, Max, what's your top 5 coming out of Final Fantasy?
All right, so actually, this is in no particular order, but it is kind of a top 5, the cards that I think could slot into specific decks in Standard. Let's talk about first Battle Menu, and this card in particular, I like it because of just the varied options. 2 of them are super relevant. The other 2 are very supportive. Being able to create the 2/2 Night Creature token, turn 2, right? Put a body out at instant speed to be a good blocker. That can help in a lot of cases, especially against aggression. But target creature +0/+4, being able to save your creature by giving enough defense, especially against red-based removal, that could help as well. It also, you could see that in kind of a prowess scenario or a valiant scenario, Boros Mice maybe even. The third option, destroying target creature with power 4 or greater, we've seen the relevance of that on, cards like Exercise, where, if you're a low curve aggro deck, you want to be able to get rid of the big hurdle, get rid of the Sheldred, and you can do that with that ability. And then gaining 4 life, maybe that's a last ditch saving you from death. None of these options by themselves seem like very good on a 2-mana value instant speed card, but all 4 put together, and I think you could slot this card into a variety of white-based decks. It could be a really good sideboard card. So in terms of versatility, seeing quite a bit of play, I like this card for that reason. My second choice here, Ultima, we talked about it briefly, but for being able to shut down the Cutter deck, the number 1 deck in the format, I mean, I can't not talk about it. I can't not bring it up. And especially post-rotation, we're going to be getting rid of Sunfall. I think, it's not going to exile anything, but, you need a replacement for that. You need more board wipes in the white-based control decks, and I think this fits that slot pretty well. So in terms of being able to fill a role, Ultima is one of those contenders that I think deserves a top spot. And then I want to bring up Joshua. Phoenix is dominant. This is a 3-mana value Boros creature. It's a 3/4 body, so 4 toughness is a huge deal in an era where we're still seeing nowhere to run. We're still seeing a lot of things that can get rid of 3 toughness bodies. Being able to discard 2 cards and then draw that many cards, that's pretty relevant in something like Jeskai Oculus. And then the 5 ability, where it transforms, it becomes the Phoenix Warden of Fire, pinging your opponent in the first 2 turns, and then the last turn. This is a way to revive that Oculus, and perhaps something else as well, perhaps a Mako. But this card pretty much is a one-stop shop for everything that Oculus wants to do on turn 3 and beyond. So I think this one slots into that deck pretty well as well. And then I also have 2 summons that I want to bring up. One is relevant to my project is constantly mono green, but if you're not playing mono green, I'm also playing Teamer Ramp right now, Dragonback Ramp, and being able to any kind of landfall deck. Landfall is about to see relevance, I suspect, especially post rotation. But phase 1, nothing to sneeze at. I mean, milling 5 cards, not a huge deal, but 2, returning them all to your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and triggering landfall a multitude of times. There are some payoffs coming up in Final Fantasy. We already do have some payoffs, but there are some payoffs coming up in Final Fantasy that you could see this being really relevant, especially since it's a 5-mana value card. By that second phase, you're at 6. You could play something like Dragonback Ramp. You could have that out on the board and take advantage of this. And and then the final phase, also the fact that it's a 7/7 reach trample body. That's insane to me. These summon cards, they are all enchantments, so I think they're subject to that removal, but nonetheless, I think this one can fill a slot in any kind of green-based ramp deck, which there are quite a few still that are possible, even outside the meta. Last but not least, I want to bring up Summon Bahamut. One, because this is going to be the card that everybody tries to cheat into play. The first two phases, destroying a non-land permanent, I mean, that's super relevant. There's still a wide variety of decks, artifact-based, enchantment-based, planeswalker-based, that are still seeing play. So that's relevant. Drawing 2 cards in phase 3, and then phase 4, I mean, it's a 9/9 flying body. Phase 4, the Mega Flare ability, just dealing equal damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So in a ramp list, this is going to be devastating. It might be the win con, and even if you cheat it out, that's not that bad. So Summon Bahamut, that's going to be one of the cards next to Knights of the Round. I almost put Knights of the Round in this slot, but for the lore, I love Bahamut, and I think that's why I placed it at my number 5. So all of these are kind of Timmy-esque, maybe except for Joshua. Phoenix is dominant. I think that card will actually see play in Jeskai Oculus. But yeah, those are my top 5. What are your top 5, Darth Rictus?
So first and foremost, I've already ordered most of these. Cecil, Dark Knight, yeah, it's such a unique effect. As some of you know, I was the guy who created Death Shadow back in the day, so I am all in on a card that runs that similar strategy. Dark Confident, again, paper boomer tendencies, but this card gets out of control if it doesn't get answered. I'm a huge fan of cards that are low on the curve, that take over games in terms of a resource war if they don't get answered, if they go unchecked. I think it's a very strong proactive stance to take whenever possible. Third on the list, Self-Destruct. Again, this is going to make Fling look stupid. This is just such a good card for mono red to get. It means you don't really have to go into ley lines to play the Cacophony Scamp scenario. You just get 2 Flings for your Heartfire Hero and Nemesis, or in a pinch, any other creature that you Monstrous Rage. It enables so many turn 3 kills with mono red. It's kind of insane. I would pick up a playset immediately. Suplex, I'm picking up. That's number 4 on my list. I don't know if it's going to be amazing in Standard or not, but I can tell you that this is going to see play all the way back to Vintage because it exiles the One Ring, and there are just not a lot of ways to do that right now. This is cheap. It's effective. Dragon Stompion Legacy is going to play 4 copies of this. I almost guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
So pick up a playset. It's worth having. It'll accrue value as time goes on as a chase uncommon from a set that is hard to get a hold of. And last but not least, if you have the money and you're willing to take the risk, Vivi or Natir. I can't tell you if this is going to work or not. I really don't know. What I do know is that this ability, if this card goes unchecked for 1 turn in a cutter deck, looks like it's just going to pop off and end the game. So when I see a card that's that strong of a role player, I'm not saying it's going to be a 4 of. I'm saying I could see a couple copies in that deck just as a nice top end that says, answer me or die next turn. And this really does a good job of that. It also allows Cutter to not even have to swing to win the game, which is potentially going to be relevant as time goes on, while simultaneously it escapes those temporary lockdowns, which is also somewhat terrifying that we now have a 3-drop that beats lockdown. That's in a deck that already was set up to deal with it. God, it's a little terrifying what this card could mean for Standard. It's a hell of a bet. It's like $85 right now, but if you got the money, I'd take the bet and get at least a couple copies.
And I just want to say before we wrap up here that the Vivi card, I predict that when we come back in a couple of months, this is going to be a discussion point. Is Cutter going to see a ban? Does it deserve to see a ban? Because post rotation, I mean, Cutter is still going to be a deck. So we'll see how that goes. I really suspect though that this will be in that discussion. Anyways, that's the final week of Tarkir Dragonstorm in the books, and that's it for our whole analysis of the set. I really enjoyed the set, what it did for Standard. I appreciate all the new cards that it introduced, and we'll see how it meshes with Final Fantasy coming up. But we are both taking a break from analyzing competitive Standard for 2 months. When we come back, we will be discussing Edge of Eternity Standard, but don't fret. The Rebellion is hard at work coming up with new content for your summer, so stay tuned to this channel nonetheless and subscribe.
Last but not least, please like, share, and comment on this video to show support for your community. We appreciate having all of you here. We'll be back at the end of the summer break. Have some fun. It's summer magic. This is usually the lull in the year where there aren't a ton of competitive events and it's time to just have fun with friends. So break out a brew, have some fun, smoke up, untap, upkeep, resist.